Hello guys, this is Modest Major here, bringing you some commentary over some Sanctuary custom game footage. This is one of the games where I managed to do fairly well from this night of matches. Honestly, there were a couple of matches where I did absolutely disgraceful. For instance, the game after this took place on Pitfall and I managed to somehow go 15 and 35. Luckily for me, you will not be seeing that atrocity of a match, but this match managed to go a little bit better in the fact that I don't know, it's something about Sanctuary where I feel like you can be a lot more liberal with your decisions. Maybe that's because I'm not playing in an exactly pro setting, but Sanctuary has a lot more escape routes, a lot more tight corners, and it feels like you can be a little bit more bold in the decisions that you decide to take. Whereas Pitfall, if you decide to commit to one of the lanes, you really have to be thoughtful in your decision to do so, because you could be destroyed for doing so. You can be heavily punished, and that's obviously something I've had a hard time adjusting to whilst trying to, you know, become some sort of a semi-competitive gamer, or whatever I'm trying to be, whatever category you want to put me in. You know, Pitfall, I can kind of just be a complete idiot in, and it's one of these things where I am just so easily punishable for some of the decisions I take, because I often, you know, I'm extremely attracted to making the dumb decision. Sometimes I like to, you know, do it on purpose to try and bait people into thinking, oh, he wouldn't do something as dumb as he does. But the problem is that would be fine if I wasn't making those dumb decisions every 2 seconds in a match. So there we go. But I had a topic that I wanted to discuss. I actually kind of went over this topic briefly in a Dawn Network video. So if you've already watched that, I apologize if I bore you, but I kind of had a different take that I wanted to go down anyway, than that commentary that I made, and it's regarding the idea of free Halo games. So free Halo games is a concept that has been quite appealing to me, honestly, since playing Halo 4. Halo 4 is one of these games that, although it has an incredible amount of potential and a good amount of depth, it might not necessarily feel like the time and care was put into it than, say, some of the previous Bungie games. And that's honestly been one of the biggest disappointments for a lot of people, is the fact that it just felt like this game could have done with another year. A couple more maps, a couple more game types, and more robust custom game settings, competitive settings, etc. You know, stuff like when the game first released, they didn't have Forge downloads where you could download the maps by typing in the custom search or whatever. You know, that was a little bit frustrating, and that's something we'd seen in previous games. It doesn't make sense that a game should be taking steps back in the trilogy, in my honest opinion. However, what I would say is that, you know, if you look at some of the other developers and publishers at the moment, one of the decisions they're taking upon is to split up their game development process into 3 different tiers on a yearly cycle. So basically, with Call of Duty, you're going to have Treyarch making a game 1 year, then Infinity Ward making one the next year, and Sledgehammer making the 3rd. With EA, you've kind of got the system of Titanfall coming out 1 year, Star Wars Battlefront, and then Battlefield. Battlefield 4, we obviously saw a giant problem in terms of the game being pushed out a little bit too early. It was met with a lot of criticism, and it had a huge amount of bugs, a colossal amount of bugs. The game was, you know, considered by many to be pretty much broken. So they're definitely trying to consolidate their development process and make it more affordable and make more sense all round. And I think what it comes down to really with Halo is the fact of, yes, we can have more games, but what kind of games do we want? Obviously, in the past, we've seen games like Spartan Assault and Halo Wars. To some extent, Halo ODST was a spin-off game, but I feel like Halo ODST was effectively a scaled-back version of Spartan Warfare. Not that necessarily that meant it was worse. Some people liked the bare-bones style of that game, and the fact that it had this, you know, stripped-back attitude where you had to rely more on your intelligence to get past the campaign, and it also had this dark, moody atmosphere, which was really something different to what we'd seen in Halo in the past. Halo is more epic, over-the-top, orchestrated insaneness, whereas ODST was more, you know, survival in this dark, gloomy city. I personally love that transition, and it was something different to what we had seen in the past. But Halo Wars and Spartan Assault, I feel like those are 2 games which, although they're interesting niche games in their own right, I personally think Halo Wars was a lot more of a well-rounded, you know, title than Spartan Assault. Spartan Assault felt a little bit like a shoot-in mobile title. When we got it on the Xbox One, it had a huge amount of microtransactions and just annoying stuff you had to work around. It felt like you weren't playing the game, but the game was playing you, trying to nickel and dime you wherever they physically could. Now that it's released on Steam, I heard they've changed quite a lot of the stuff and there's no microtransaction, but that feels honestly worse. It's like, oh, well, Xbox fans, you know, you're our core fan base, but you know, Steam and PC, well, we're trying to attract them to our market, so we're going to give them the better deal. Whereas you guys who early adopted it and bought it at the beginning, well, you know, you're kind of already on our side. You bought Spartan Assault, you idiots, so we don't have to worry about your loyalty. That's just kind of how I felt about that. But really, I've been bouncing around this idea of what I feel like would make a really great standalone Halo game. I wouldn't necessarily feel like it was tacked on to the Halo experience and trying to get money out of you, but it was an actual, genuinely good concept for a Halo game. And I believe that's what it could be, is an MMO game. In PlanetSide 2, you have this gigantic map in which 3 different races vie for control over contested territory. I feel like this could work so easily within the Halo universe, where you have these 3 different races in the Covenant, the UNSC, and the Flood, or maybe even the Prometheans, depending on which way you want to go about it. And they all have their own unique vehicles, weaponry, classes, and it's something that the Halo game has kind of had cemented in it for a while, you know, even with the class system of, say, for example, the Golden Elites, the Red Elites, the Blue Elites, and they all, you know, ascend and descend in rank accordingly. Then you could take from the idea of Star Wars Battlefront, where you know, if you get a certain amount of kills or points by a certain amount of time in the game, you become a Jedi. What if in Halo, by a certain amount of kills, you become a well-known character or a well-known figure of the Halo universe? You become a general, you become the Master Chief, you become Tartarus the Brute Chieftain. That would be epic. How epic would that be? And then they could feel free to explore with the vehicles and be, you know, have the vehicles be dominant in a sense, as long as they have enough counters to go against it. But they could be pretty, you know, liberal with how they wanted to, you know, bring in vehicles. You know, in Halo BTB, there's got to be these restrictions in place of, well, you know, there is this small map, the Spartans only have a certain amount of power, unless we give them some ridiculous weapon, which would then be overpowered. There's not much we can really do in terms of adding in tons and tons of vehicles, but with these massive maps on a PlanetSide 2 scale, there would be enough breathing room, wiggle room for the Spartans to be able to get away, or the UNSC to be able to get away and not feel like they were being absolutely oppressed and dominated. You could also have the ordnance system put in place so that if you're getting kills on foot, you're able to acquire anti-vehicle weaponry like the Spartan lasers on a regular basis, so you're not feeling like you're being absolutely spawn camped and dominated at all times. Just the vehicle combat in general, I think of the idea of going over a hill and then seeing Pelicans coming in from the UNSC side, dropping off, you know, UNSC military people, personnel, and then on the other side, the Phantoms coming in, dropping in the elites by those big, you know, gravity lifts. Banshees flying overhead, firing bombs, sticky grenades going overhead, and just absolute chaos. And that, to me, sounds amazing. You know, if it was planned in a balanced enough format to the point it wasn't absolute mayhem, it would give you this casual experience of BTB warfare, except they don't have to scale it back. It feels like, always for me, my biggest problem with like Halo 4 BTB is it feels like they have to scale it back because, you know, it can't be too overpowered. Halo has these arena shooter roots which just can't be tarnished. There has to be this element of the better player wins at all times. Whereas if you had this spin-off game where they could just do whatever they felt like, they could go all the way, they wouldn't have to be constrained because this was a different game. This was trying to accomplish a completely different goal, and then as a result, the arena shooter gameplay in the original Halo trilogy wouldn't have to be necessarily as constrained by the BTB at the same time. It kind of feels like there's a little bit of a clash going on with casual and non-casual gameplay in the Halo games, and that's something that's always frustrated me, is that, you know, I like both of those in their own ways. They're both fun, but I don't like the fact that each of them are holding each other back because they can't go all the way. That's just my opinion. If you guys agree, let me know in the comments. If you have some ideas to bounce around, let me know. I've been Modest Major. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.